I was a reasonably successful used car dealer.
That's an understatement. So everyone is going to want to know, why now? After collecting these cars for more than half a century, why have you now made the decision that it's the time to sell them?
Probably because now I'm, maybe in a few years I will be 90 odd years old, and got to start thinking. I don't want to leave people lots of problems. People like you, somebody come along and trying to steal the cars.
Oh yeah.
So better somebody steals from me.
These cars, they span 70 years of Grand Prix racing. You've got behind us here, we've got the best collection of Ferrari racing cars in the world. We've got some of the most amazing Grand Prix cars like the Van Wall, probably the most important British car of all time. All of your Brabhams, all of your Grand Prix winning Brabhams, and some of them you've owned for more than 50 years. Is there a particular favourite for you? Is there a car that stands out that...
Well, I suppose I'm very happy to have the important Ferraris. Particularly like the one really was the first car to get any recognition.
375.
Otherwise, the 375. So that car, I think a lot of. But all of them really, because Nicky Lauda was so close with me for so long, the Nicky cars that he drove.
The championship winner, the 75.
Yeah. Cars like Carlos Reutemann, which is another car which somebody in Argentina wanted to buy. He said at any price. I said, well, it's not for sale. But all these cars have got some attachment. Half the time I don't remember, but...
What was Enzo like? I know you had a great relationship with Enzo. You still have an amazing relationship with Piero.
Yeah.
What was the old man like?
Super. It was really good because we never had an argument, because he didn't speak any English and I didn't speak any Italian, so it was good. There was always somebody there helping us to understand things that each one didn't want the other one to understand. So eventually, we got on very, very, very well together.
But before we talk about the cars, because I'd like to walk around the cars with you a little bit later. We'll walk around the Ferraris, walk around the Brabhams, talk about the cars that are really important to you, which I know all of them are. But I want to know more, or I think everybody else wants to know a little bit more about you, your time in Formula One. How did you get into Formula One? Because you are the godfather of Formula One. You're still the godfather today. But how did that all evolve? Like, how did you get into it?
I was a reasonably successful used car dealer.
That's an understatement.
And I thought 40 years old, what actually happened, it was a nice time in England when they decided to put all sorts of restrictions, VAT or something.
VAT came in.
Something like that, yeah. And I thought, well, I don't want to be a tax collector.
Yeah.
So I better get out. So I said on the 4th of April, because everything seemed to happen on the 5th of April, everything gets closed. And people said to me, you're completely mad. You're running a business. Everything's open. I had quite a few different types of businesses then, all the same thing. Either I was an agent for different manufacturers and things. So it was in a reasonably sensible way.
Is this in motorbikes or cars by now? This is cars.
Mostly cars, yeah. And I said, well, we're closing. What do you mean? I said, well, we closed the doors and we're closed.
And this is when VAT first came into the country?
Exactly.
Yeah. Some people don't believe that, and I know that is actually true, but it was the time when VAT came in, you just closed the car business down. And then, but how did you get into Formula One? Did you just think, I'm going to buy a Formula One team? This was after your time with Jock and Rindt?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I knew that Brabham's was going to be sold. And so I thought, well, maybe that would be a good start. So I met up with everyone that was anything to do with it.
Was that Ron at the time?
Ron Terenak.
Ron Terenak, yeah.
And we come to an agreement.
How much was Brabham back then?
It's a bit embarrassing to discuss this, really.
Okay.
It was 100, I think, 100 somethings.
That's a lot of money though. In the early 70s, what you could, if you think what you could buy in the early 70s for that money, you bought a Formula One team. You know, as a used car dealer, you must have been doing a lot better than I do as a used car dealer, just to close the shop down and say, I'm going to go and buy a Formula One team today.
No, I was a bit lucky in general. Things worked out quite well for me. Not that I was good at doing anything, but other people helped me by not being so bright.
And before your time in Formula One, obviously, to touch on it, you started as a motorbike dealer.
Yeah.
But you are the epitome, if I must say, of a self-made man. Like, you absolutely had done it all on your own. You went to work for somebody originally as selling motorbikes.
Yeah.
And then you opened your own dealership.
Oh, I used to do most of the things for the guy who used to play golf and things like that.
Mm.
Wasn't too excited about business.
Mm.
So I really bought him out.
Who was that?
Fred Compton was the guy opposite.
Yeah.
This was, do you know, I don't remember the guy's name.
Yeah. And this was in Kent.
In Bexley Heath.
And then
it's stupid me forgetting his name. I was so close with him.
So how many deals have you done since then? And it's
quite a few.
This is 60.
There's no reason for forgetting somebody that was quite important.
Mm.
I went to work from him. I went to work for a gas company because my father wouldn't let me leave school unless I had a sensible job. He happened to know the chief chemist in the gas company in Dartford. And I said, well, it wasn't what I was too interested in doing, but he said, well, this is, if you want to leave school, this is, if you go and work there, we'll support that. And the chemist said yes. So I went to work at the gas company in the laboratory. And he was very nice, the chief chemist there, because he helped me. I ran a used motorcycle dealership in the laboratory, more or less.
Oh, really?
So
selling the other students motorbikes?
So people, no, there was not like that, but I used to advertise different things. And they used to ring in on the number of the laboratory, and the chief chemist used to answer the phone. So I got another inquiry for the BSA, and things like that. So it grew from there.
And it just evolved then into car dealing?
Yeah, then the guy opposite from where I bought the motorbike shop from, he was another guy that didn't particularly want to work too hard, in fact, work at all. So I agreed with him that I would go 50-50 with him in half of, it was quite a large business in the car business, and I would run a motorcycle the other side. So it all worked well. Okay. In the end, I sort of bought him out as well because he wanted to sell.
But to put this in perspective, this was so long ago that, I mean, I know that in the 1950s you bought a new 300 SL Gullwing. You know, 1955. This is nearly 70 years ago, and you've been at it basically, and I can testify, every day since. You're still dealing every day. You're still. And I feel half the reason actually why you're ready to part company with these cars is that you'll probably like the idea of being involved in the deal, being involved in the sale.
I don't want to sell.
I thought you said we were selling.
I will, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
There's lots of things in life.
I've got to manage that.
Exactly right. There's lots of things in life that you need to do that you perhaps don't want to. what often happens, I think, that I've found out, certainly with some cars, people get divorced and there's an argument over the value of a cars or things like that. And that's how they get sort of released. And I've been lucky enough to find out and buy them.
The stories about your time in Formula One, you started with Stuart Lewis Evans?
Yeah, we were friends, or his father and I were friends. And then his dad used to race 500 cars, which I used to race as well. And then when Stuart sort of come out of captivity so he could do some of these things, that's what happened.
And after his accident, how hard was that? Because you were very close with Stuart, weren't you? But back in those days, accidents happened way more frequently in F1.
We lost too many people.
Mm-hmm. And that's something which I think people take for granted today, but you've done so much work in the 80s, really, late 70s, 80s, with Sid Watkins, and these days people talk about Formula One drivers being heroes, but respectfully, the sport is not a fraction of the danger that it used to be, when 30% of the grid in a calendar season would be lost.
Well, maybe not 30%, but certainly we'd lose 2 or 3 guys, known drivers. But that's when I got Sid Watkins to stop being a surgeon and a doctor, to come and join us and follow us to all the races. And we eventually built up and made sure that all the circuits, before they could have a race, they had to have proper medical facilities. In some cases where, if necessary, people for burns and things like that, or they could be operated on at the circuit rather than wait, for somebody to take them to the hospital.
Was there a specific moment in time that triggered that, though? Was there something that you said, we need to do something about this? You would watch so many of your friends.
Yeah. I think, so, as you're quite right, he said, there's so many people we used to lose during the year that there's nothing really that says, well, I remember this happening.
It's hard to be able to relate to that, because you look at some of these cars behind us, and when you watch some of their old races, and other cars would have had bad accidents and they'd just be on the side of the road, and the race would continue on with the cars still on the side of the road. The race would not be stopped. Where these days, anything that's on the track or near the track causes either a safety car or a red flag.
Oh, it depends what country it is.
Yeah.
In some places, Italy, there, if anyone got killed, or they'd want a proper inquiry, so they'd want to stop the race and more or less do an investigation during the race, because it was Italy. Instead of taking half an hour, would probably take 3 or 4 years. So it wasn't too practical to talk about stopping racing. That's what happened with Senna. Same sort of thing happened there.
But it's quite incredible how you bought Brabham in 72, the early 1970s, and then how did it come around that you was a team owner, and you were with all these other team owners at the time, and Enzo Ferrari, all great operators, but yet you were the one that they wanted to go and manage everything on behalf of all of the teams, and then that evolved into you controlling the whole sport. Like, how did that, was it just a snowball effect, or was there how did that happen?
But like lots of things, I suppose, in life, things happen and you try and look back and say, why did that happen? And I think basically, as I'd bought Brabham, Max Mosley used to own March, and he said to me, we've got this association of sorts. I'd like you to come to some of them, or join or whatever. So I went to the meetings, first meeting. I was sort of generally talking about everything, and then it was that I realised that perhaps these guys were racing didn't know if they were going to get paid and when and how much. So I said, well, this is really could be tidied up a little bit.
Who was making the money then, though? Was it the circuits, or who was actually making the money from all the teams travelling and racing of the weekends?
Well, they did their own thing, basically.
Mm.
You know, so there was nobody that you could say, this guy was in charge of that. They, what used to happen with the promoters, if a team needed to race at their race, because if they won, they got points for winning the World Championship, they'd pay that team a lot less, knowing they'd have to be there. Mm. And some of the other teams, they didn't care. Yeah.
And then what did you change of it, though, for the teams? You said what did you say to the circuits that you need to now pay us to come?
No, they asked me, could I look after this? So people got paid. Since I said, well, it would be nice to organise something so at least people knew how much they were getting paid and for what reason. So we sorted something out where they got paid depending on their championship positions of the previous year. But strangely enough, is still now operating today. Same system. Same
formula.
Yeah.
And you touched on Max Mosley. Obviously, your relationship with Max, I know how fond of him you were. And I guess Max was a great ally for you. Without Max, you know, a lot of the stuff that you'd done in Formula One, you needed him to be your ally at the time.
Well, yes. I mean, he was a sensible guy that people listened to. He's probably the only one, more or less, in the group that spoke English.
Yeah.
Or proper English.
I always recall you saying that you thought he should be the Prime Minister.
He should have been. I said to Mrs. Thatcher one day, you know, you should take Max, and he had a small problem. It wasn't a problem at all, but people thought it was a problem because of his father's position those days in England. But it didn't. I think in lots of ways it embarrassed Max a bit because people would bring this up. I said, this is Mr. I remember his father is Oswald. Yes, I know, but it's nothing to do with him.
No.
So he was a barrister, had raced.
He was a decent driver, wasn't he?
He was a competent driver.
Yeah.
In Formula 2, and he was up together. And he eventually sorted out when they built a March team. And so he was well involved. So people respected him because he knew exactly what he was talking about and could help other people with any of their legal problems. So we worked very closely together.
But then from Max leaving or stepping down from the FIA, he was there for a very long time. I can't remember the exact amount of years, but a long time. You know, you've been involved since then with everybody else. It's unbelievable. I'm not sure people understand how involved you've been on everything that's been related to Formula One, including the presidents of the FIA. You know, you got Jean Todt to convince him to go and be.
I suppose when you've been around as long as I had been around in Formula One, if they were looking for somebody else to listen to, better listen to me a little bit more, perhaps.
But it's unbelievable how everyone came to you about, you know, the story of you got Jean Todt to go to Ferrari. Yeah. You were involved in Schumacher going to Ferrari. You were involved in, can you talk about the fact of when Lewis went to Mercedes? I recall there was a dispute about his salary.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ferrari needed someone rather than an Italian to run Ferrari. And I, at the time, spoke to the president then of Fiat, actually, and suggested, no, we can't have...
This is Agnelli at the time, is it? Gianni Agnelli?
We can't have anybody else. It's got to be Italian. I said, well, I guarantee if you win the World Championship, he will find he had an Italian grandmother.
Yeah.
Wherever she come from, but it wouldn't make a lot of difference. Yeah. So let's wait and see first. So eventually he agreed. He rang me one day. He said, I think you're probably right. Can you get Mr. Todd? And that's what happened.
And at that time, Ferrari were really in the doldrums in that early 90s.
Yeah.
They had won nothing for so long. And then basically you got Schumacher to go there, Jean Todt, Ross Brawn. It was a foreign invasion.
I think it really started with Jean Todt, really.
Yeah.
That people could see with somebody new there at Ferrari would grow quicker, which is what happened. So they then, and Jean explained to these people what he had in mind, and it wasn't going to be just an Italian team.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and a good, strong character to go to Ferrari to get things done.
Yeah.
And then again, Lewis going to Mercedes. Everyone, and I know you'll be first to credit Nicky because how close you were to Nicky and how much respect you have for Nicky. And I know, you always say to me that Nicky is so responsible for all that success at Mercedes-Benz. But for Lewis to actually go to Mercedes, you were heavily involved in that.
My involvement was basically, there was a little bit of an argument at one stage over the payment, what he wanted and what they wanted to pay. And the boss then of Mercedes was pretty fixed on what they thought it ought to be. And I said, well, we're sort of about, I think it was about 3 million apart. I said, well, if you don't want to pay, I will.
Yeah.
Because I think Nicky would, Lewis at that time, according to Nicky as well, would be ideal for Formula One. He was there, but to keep him rather than running away, going somewhere else. He was with Mercedes. He was the Mercedes guy. Don't disturb things.
It's intriguing in such contemporary times on a business that you built to such a corporate level, how you could still run it so entrepreneurial, how you could turn around and say, do you know what, I'll put the extra money in because you knew it was good for the sport, for Lewis to go to Mercedes. And
well, it was at Mercedes. It was good for him not to leave.
Yeah.
Which was more important.
Yeah. And when you look at Formula One today compared to what it was like in the 70s and 80s, and you had so many privateer teams, starting, I look back at Van Wall, right the way through to Brabham and Williams. Could that happen today? How do you think a privateer team could be successful in Formula One today?
Depends who would get behind it. So it might be successful if another entrepreneurial sort of operator decided they wanted to do something.
But it's much harder.
Yeah, because of the cost.
Yeah.
Obviously. A manufacturer can, it's the wrong word to use, to hide the costs, but they wouldn't hide them, but they could use Formula One in a much better way than a private person could use Formula One. A private, like in those days that you're talking about, people that were involved because they loved racing, they loved whatever, involved in racing.
And of all the privateer teams, putting Brabham aside, who do you think done the best job?
Probably Tyrrell, Ken Tyrrell.
Yeah.
He had Jackie Stewart with him, and Jackie was very
loyal
and competent.
Very capable driver, one of the best drivers of all time.
Yeah.
And of drivers-wise, who did you rate more than anybody else? Who's the standout drivers for you?
Apart from Jochen Rindt.
How good was Jochen?
Well, he was better than anybody else by a long way. So, and we were sort of partners in different things. So,
is it fair to say you had other plans with Jochen if the accident?
Yeah, he would have been. We had a team ready to go and roll, but we'd have had Brabham as well. So that was a big. Apart from the fact he was a close friend, it was just like most of these guys, you become friendly with most of the drivers. You know, when Nicky had his bad accident, I mean, that was a terrible time for everyone. People that rescued him and whatever. I sat with Nicky at Monza in a little caravan, which Ferrari used to have at the circuits. And this was so close to when he'd had the accident, like a few weeks.
His first race back.
Yeah. And he took his helmet off after first practice and the blood was coming down, you know. So he was still in that sort of state. That's Nicky.
The strength of the man, though, is just unrepeatable today. Yeah. To think that, you know, the courage to come back so soon after.
Absolutely.
And killing him to think that he was going to watch James win the championship. And, you know, when you talk about that year, and I've seen the photo of you and James playing backgammon on the grid before the start of the race. Like it's...
Well, the race was in Japan when Nicky got out the car and said it was too dangerous. And that's when James won.
What happened in that race for the race to still take place, though? You were so, at that point...
No, well, a lot of the drivers said it's not possible, we can't race. And it was... By then I'd made a very sensible arrangement with television, and it was necessary that all the races were going to be televised.
Or you wouldn't have got paid?
Nothing to do with money. It was the case it would have broken down something that had taken a long time to build up.
Yeah.
So they said, so we can't race. I said, well, you can if you want to. If you're saying to me, this was one or two of the guys said, if you're saying to me, we don't want to, I understand that. You don't have to. Don't get in the car. So they said, well, but this has happened at 2 or 3 other circuits at different times.
Probably one of the worst weather conditions that there was ever a race ever took place in, though, isn't it?
Certainly for Nicky to stop, it was.
And ended up just getting pipped on the last lap. Basically, James overtaking on the last lap to win the championship. And you were also very close to James?
To James. I'm talking about James, yeah.
And you were close to James. What was he like?
Character.
Yeah.
A super guy.
He probably got you into a bit of trouble over the years.
I got him out of a lot. So it was even if he did.
Yeah, he's... there are not many characters like him that's ever been in the sport.
No. He was a bit special.
So, did you answer? I'm sorry, we went off track, but who do you rate? So, who do you rate the highest apart of all the drivers? I mean, you can talk about drivers right from the start of Formula One. Nobody else can do that.
I have the big respect for Prost, because it was nicely those days that there's the car.
Yeah.
That's the circuit.
Always had a strong teammate.
Yes.
That was against him. I mean, when I say a strong teammate, not a team...
Well, yes.
He never actually ever had a teammate that was there to help him.
Well, the team always wanted somebody that was keeping... I don't think he wanted to be kept sort of alive and well and wanted to win. But I think team always thought it better in case he decides to go to sleep a little bit. We've got somebody to wake him up.
Yeah.
So they always found the right people, which developed another good driver in the team. But with Alan, I mean, he got in the car, the flag, no lights those days, waved, start the race, and off he went without help. Now they sit in a car, they know what the tyre pressures are, they know exactly, they get told how the car's performing.
Change a different setting.
Well, apart from telling them that, they would know and be able to adjust these things today. So the driver really and truly, his job was racing.
And him and Senna together, that must have been the strongest partnership ever in Formula One.
Yes, certainly it was.
And Senna, special, obviously.
Yeah, just special. I mean, most of these guys that are that successful, they're special characters. They're not just people that should be in an office.
No. What was his loss like, Senna's loss to Formula One?
Funny thing, it was a bigger loss in Japan. He had a bigger following in Japan than he did in Brazil.
Yeah.
But it was, he couldn't be killed, couldn't die, couldn't do anything.
He was Superman.
That was it. I mean, he was there and that was it. So it was a much bigger shock.
It probably, although nobody ever wanted it, but it probably generated even more interest in Formula One after it happened.
I remember very well Max afterwards saying to me, well, that's the end of Formula One.
This is Max Mosley.
Yeah, when he was president, I said, well, I have to wait and see. And it wasn't, because immediately afterwards we could see the amount of interest from all different parts of the world, which we'd never believed even knew what Formula One was, had followed him.
And where do you see it going today, Formula One? How do you, since stepping away from the sport a few years ago, what's your opinion on it today? How do you see it going?
Well, I'm very, very happy that the people that bought the company are sincere, and want to succeed, and are doing a good job to make sure it does succeed. They're doing lots of things today which I probably wouldn't have done. Too many races.
24 we're up to now?
Yeah, which I hope isn't bad, but it means that there's going to be a lot of trouble with the teams, with their families, being left now. It was bad enough when we used to have 16 races, they used to complain. So I think the pressure on people working inside Formula One is so high.
I know you don't like credit, but I always think when a singer-songwriter, they have royalties, checks that come through the post all the time for every time their song gets played on the radio. To use a similar analogy, I look at everyone today who's in the paddock who are on amazing salaries, right from the mechanics, who mechanics, team principals, the drivers who are making tens and tens of millions, and all young individuals, and maybe not all of them are historians of the sport, and they probably don't realise, or they should all realise, that sincerely, without you and what you created, those guys wouldn't benefit from that today.
Well, I think all companies improve, people think of things. I was a little bit more, it's not the right word, courageous, but when I thought something should work or could work, I'd give it a go and find out. And if it worked, we kept on. If it didn't work, nobody knew. We just didn't bother with it.
You famously never wanted praise, though. You always rebuff it. You're always, when people, knighthood, can we touch on the knighthood?
No, better not. I've got some very firm ideas about these sort of things.
But in the 90s, when, should I say, you were either offered the opportunity or you were invited?
But I mean, those property ideas, those days, when people used to go out and capture a country, they'd come back with the key, more or less, to the king or the queen or whoever it happens to be at the time. It was always the queen. And say, we've just captured this country and it belongs to England, which since then we've managed to give back to them. But anyway, that's how it was. And they were knighted for doing something super special. Super special.
That's admirable, but I'm not sure how many people that you could ever chat with who has been offered the opportunity to have a knighthood and turns it down with the reasons of saying, well, actually, I don't think I deserve one, when for the sport, for the country, for flying the flag, British motorsport, Formula One, is all the teams in Formula One are basically, with the exception of a couple, are based in Britain. And you ran this international business, this worldwide business, from offices in the middle of London.
Yeah, but it's a different thing. I mean, if they want to give a knighthood for somebody that's won a world championship few times. It's unusual for somebody to have done that, and they haven't had. Millions of people have had the same opportunity that I've had, and I got lucky and grabbed it when it came floating past.
Yeah,
My night of business. I mean, I remember the letter I wrote back thanking, but I was just too busy.
I've seen the letter. I didn't want to mention it, but
No, I was just too busy.
Who replies and says thanks for the offer, but I'm a little bit too busy at the moment?
Well, that was the truth. That was the truth.
Anyway, I think it would be great to have a look around these cars. Thank you for entrusting the sale of these cars to us, to my business, to handle them for you. It's an incredible opportunity. It is, without question of a doubt, the most important racing car collection in the world. These things get me stimulated just walking around them. And to think that you've been collecting them for over 50 years, it must be very hard at the moment for you to have made the decision. I have been on your case for several years, but it must have been hard to make the decision to say, okay, green light, let's go.
You haven't sold them yet.
Yeah, well, I better get on with it before you change your mind.
No, I'm more worried for you losing interest in getting involved being a salesman any longer. You want to be a race driver
No,
now.
I'm not a race driver.
No, you want to be a race driver.
Yeah, I'd love to be a race driver, but I definitely...
or a golfer, I'm not too sure. I see these things maybe.
Yeah, everyone's confirmed that's not possible. Anyway, let's have a walk around these cars.
Okie doke.